Nearly all FOMC participants expect that it will be appropriate to raise interest rates somewhat further by the end of the year. But at last week's meeting, considering how far and how fast we've moved, we judged it prudent to hold the target range steady to allow the committee to assess additional information and its implications for monetary policy.
That was Fed Chair Jerome Powell speaking yesterday before the House Financial Services Committee as part of his semi-annual report to both chambers of Congress. The central bank leader is slated to appear before the Senate Banking Committee later today. And joining us now to discuss it all is Tactive Wealth Advisor Eddy Gifford. Welcome, Eddy.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Glad to see you. We had Bitcoin break above 30,000, yet the Bank of England raised rates to 50 basis points today, a little bit higher than anticipated. Though there was some talk about 50 basis points, it didn't seem to really have that much of an effect, at least for the time being, on crypto. Nonetheless, it kind of signals, it seems, that maybe central banks are serious about the rate hikes. What's your take?
Yeah, I think that the one thing that's been made clear by central banks all across the world is that they're not going to back down from the inflation fight. Specifically Powell, he has said that he would rather see the U.S. go into a recession than see inflation run away on us. So, the market, initially didn't seem to believe it, but the funny thing about it is we've seen this a couple of times now where we've had like some pretty significant uncertainty arise, and we've seen Bitcoin actually rally off of that news. So, I think that what's happening is there's a little bit more adoption than maybe there was, 12, 18 months ago. And we're seeing people kind of use Bitcoin at least as a piece of their flight to safety when these types of moments arise. So I know that like interest rates in general can kind of break things. And if things break, then, Bitcoin's probably following it down also. But it seems like it's being a little bit stronger relative to the other risk on assets, Do
you think part of that at least is sort of this side business? I think Katie Greifeld from Bloomberg pointed out that it's a 17% rally since it was announced that there would be BlackRock was iShares was filing this ETF to a spot ETF on Bitcoin. That it's sort of these things are happening regardless of what the Fed is doing, and that the market is so thin that people are just sort of speculating in Bitcoin, taking on a little bit of risk, but at the same time, kind of looking over their shoulders, seeing what the Fed is doing.
Yeah, I think that, there's always the global macro or the macro picture where, there's a lot to be scared of. Of course, then there's also the price action, and there's also the momentum and the events that are occurring that are helping out, right? I mean, we look at something like NVIDIA last month where it went to the sky when they were talking about all their AI. And the funny thing about that is that Bitcoin and NVIDIA are very closely correlated, and NVIDIA took off and Bitcoin just kind of stayed there. And so, we could see Bitcoin potentially like catch up. We could see NVIDIA fall and them kind of like settle and be correlated again. Or maybe, maybe AI is the decoupling event and Bitcoin can just kind of stand on its own. We'll see. Of course, anytime you have a big player like BlackRock, jumping into the space, or you hear that like Schwab and Fidelity have invested in EDX and they're kind of behind the space. It makes you have a little bit more confidence as an investor that, hey, maybe this Bitcoin thing is actually going to be around if you're kind of uneducated in regards to what Bitcoin is and what it does.
I think I can maybe guess your answer to this based on your previous ones, but let's talk about Bitcoin options contracts where 3.3 billion changed hands across major exchanges, including Deribit. That's the highest single day notional volume in 3 months. Are you surprised about this?
Not really. I mean, we've been talking a lot about the fact that it's smart to be building a position right now in Bitcoin. And then, when you get an event that says, hey, all the big players are coming to town now, it's hard not to chase that or to try to get ahead of it. And so you're going to see a lot of bigger money coming in when something like that happens, which is exactly what we've seen over the last couple of days. Fortunately, we do have a trading strategy that capitalized and bought and already took some profits. So the nice thing is that the market ebbs and flows, and we just have to pay attention. And from a long-term perspective, we do think that it's a great alternative to have in your portfolio to just kind of, offset some of the risk that's associated with just the traditional markets.
Do you see any potential threats to Bitcoin? And I bring this up because you brought up this whole idea that the market is starting to take the Fed seriously, that they finally, and we talked about this on the show several times, the conflict between the bond market and the stock market, where the bond market has taken the Fed seriously. The stock market viewed it as sort of like, whatever, you're not raising rates again. But it seems that, maybe they're starting to wake up to it, as you said. Do you think that could seep over into the crypto markets enough to hurt Bitcoin as people find it more expensive to take on those levered positions?
I think that's always something that can happen, right? I think that, anytime that you have like a big macro event, if something happens, like a huge credit event that just causes the US stock market and the global stock market to tumble, I'm going to say that Bitcoin's going to fall with it, right? But I think that the good news now compared to maybe like 3 or 4 years ago is more and more people are believing that Bitcoin can stand on its own, that it's not only a speculative type investment. So obviously, there's other risks. I think if we end up with like some type of like competing digital dollar or something, that could at least initially hurt Bitcoin. But I think that, less and less people want to lean on what the government is telling them to do and want to lean more on themselves. And we're seeing that in, our financial planning. Clients are saying, no, I don't want to include Social Security in my financial planning. I don't want to lean on the government for anything. And so that mentality, I think, helps out things like, Bitcoin and Ether and other cryptocurrencies.
What about some threats to, the global macro picture? I'm sorry, not just macro, but also geopolitical risks, because we have now saber rattling in the South China Straits here. And of course, that's a nice place where one can get computer chips, which are processed. You want to get those miners going, and you need chips for that. And whether or not that those facilities won't come under, I don't know, bombing threats is an issue. Do you think that sort of will that have any effect over the next few months as we start to hear some scary stuff coming out of Beijing?
I think that it adds to volatility. I think that you are going to see maybe the price jump around a little bit more. I think that the numbers that we're still looking at is, 25 is kind of like that bottom threshold. As long as we continue to hold there, we're in a good spot. If we can get above 31.5 and hold there, then we definitely have some upside. If we're looking at it from just the supply and demand type of scenario, though, if there's not as many coins out there, right, then that would or should push the price up. So if we don't have as many chips and we can't mine as many Bitcoin, then there's not as much Bitcoin out there. So that would make it like more expensive. So, but the volatility is going to be real. I don't think that we're out of the woods yet. I think that both in risk in all types of risk markets, we're due for, some unexpected moves and whether that's to the upside or the downside, I don't know, but I'm definitely fearful that we could see a pretty big pullback in risk assets in general, just because we've gone kind of straight up over the last 6 months, and we've seen it with Bitcoin too. Like, I mean, it was up like 40%, over 40% in January, right? So everything has to breathe from time to time. I'm just hoping that it's a breath and it's not a collapse, right?
Buy the rumors, buy the news, sell the rumor in Bitcoin.
Exactly.
I think is the way it goes here.
Of course.
Eddy,
yeah.
Thank you for joining us this morning.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
That was Tactive Wealth Advisor Eddy Gifford.